Welcome to Northwest, a Unitarian Universalist congregation where we are gathering this morning both virtually and in person as one connected church community. I'm Alex Myers, my pronouns are he and they, and I am your worship leader for this morning's service. And as a point of personal privilege, this completes my infinity gauntlet at Northwest. I have now done every single role. We, the members of the Northwest Unitarian Universalist congregation, aspire to be a welcoming, diverse, multi-generational, and inclusive congregation. To this end, we endeavor to treat each other with respect, trust, kindness, and patience, foster expression of ideas, beliefs, values, identities, and experiences, lift one another and the congregation as a whole, provide a supportive environment for all sharing hope on this journey, listen and learn together while caring for each other and the planet, and build a fair, peaceful, and socially responsible world. May we create a beloved community with a gentle heart and thoughtful ear, and maintain this community with our 8 Unitarian Universalist principles as our guide. We welcome NWUU member, the Reverend Peter Gable, an ordained Presbyterian minister, as our guest speaker this morning. Each month, we contemplate a theme using Soul Matters. This month, we are considering the concept of heritage. Today's message asks us to explore the question, how do Aristotle's 10 rules for a happy life inform our 8 UU principles? If you are a visitor online and would like Northwest to stay in touch with you, please fill out the visitor form appearing in the chat box. If you are with us in person, you can fill out the visitor sign-in form in the atrium. And now please greet your neighbors with a wave from wherever you are. And now, before we begin the prelude, let's all take a deep breath and settle into a time of worship. We begin our worship services with a land acknowledgement. We honor and pay our respects to the land on which we live and work, which was violently stolen through colonialism, genocide, and forced removal of its traditional stewards. These stewards are the Anishinaabeg, the Council of the Three Fires, which include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi, also known as the Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi tribes. We also acknowledge the people of African descent who were forcibly removed from their land and separated from their families through kidnapping and enslavement, and pay reverence and respect to them for building this country's infrastructure and economy with no compensation or reparations to date. We light our chalice, the symbol of our faith, knowing this morning that many other Unitarian Universalist congregations across this land and around the world are doing the same. We do so with words from the Reverend Karen Johnston. Ancestors who spoke with bravest fire, lend us your senses that we may know another world is on her way, breathed into life with our participation in her creation. Forebears who led the way where there was at first no way, lend us your persistence, your temerity, your assurance that the moral arc of the universe does indeed bend towards justice. Ones who went before us, sacrificing for a future not your own, help us to give of ourselves, that the common stones in our hands today might be cathedrals of compassion today, halls of restorative justice tomorrow, sheltering walls of beloved community the day after. It is Sunday morning, the day we gather. Let us be thankful and full of praise to be in the company of those who came before, yet are ever in our midst. Our first hymn this morning is hymn number 338 in Singing the Living Tradition, I Seek the Spirit of a Child. You are invited to rise in body or spirit and join me as you are willing and able. Encourage all who gather together to grow more generous in spirit and in action. This is the great end of all the world's faith traditions, to bring the human being closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We now take an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will mutually support this self-supporting congregation and the shared plate recipient. Each month, Northwest shares 50% of the plate collections with a local 501c3 charity organization. The Social Justice Committee has selected Lighthouse of Oakland County as our October shared plate recipient. Lighthouse endeavors to build equitable communities that alleviate poverty in partnership with and in service to individuals, families, and organizations. You can donate in a variety of ways that are now visible on your screen. For those of us here in person, we will pass a collection basket for checks and cash.
Jenna asked me if I'd like to sign Spirit Blood. Because that's what we did in our Florida church all the time. It would be helpful if we sing it. I know she was trying to play it, but I think I remember all of it. Spirit of life, come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion.
number 1012 and singing The Journey, When I Am Frightened. You are not 15 or 12 or 17. You are 100 wild centuries, and 15 bringing with you in every breath and in every step everyone who has come before you, all the yous that you have been, the mothers of your mother, the fathers of your father. If someone in your family tree was trouble, 100 were not. The bad do not win, not finally, no matter how loud they are. We simply would not be here if that were so. You are made fundamentally from the good. With this knowledge, you never march alone. You are the breaking news of the century. You are the good who has come forward through it all, even if so many days feel otherwise. But think, when you, as a child, learned to speak, it's not that you didn't know words. It's that from the centuries you knew so many, and it's hard to choose the words that will be your own. From those centuries, we human beings bring with us the simple solutions and songs, the river bridges and star charts and song harmonies, all in service to a simple idea that we can make a house called tomorrow, where we bring finally into the new day, every day is ourselves. And that's all we need to start. That's everything we require to keep going. Look back only for as long as you must, then go forward into the history you will make. Be good, then better. Write books, cure disease, make us proud. make yourself proud. And those who came before you, when you hear thunder, hear it as their applause.
Boy, not only did I forget to raise the lectern this morning, but I'm wearing my last glasses I had before the ones that just broke. So hopefully this will all work out. I want to share something first that often before services I talk to Bob Holly. I guess we're here early enough to do that and stuff like that. And he reminded me of something that we've discussed before, and that is, you know, when you think about it, does it really make any difference how we live? You know, in the big picture. And I don't know, I thought about that a little bit, and I thought, you know, in the big picture, it would rarely make any difference. But for the people in your life, you make all the difference in the world, good or bad. I didn't think he would. So, yes, so about 6 weeks ago, a little article in the Atlantic piqued my interest as a sermon topic. This happens to you if you're a preacher, and no matter what you read, oh, there's a topic, there's something to preach about. I love that, a list of rules, Aristotle's 10 rules for a happy life. A list of rules for a happy life. I can think of some other lists in some of our backgrounds, like the 10 Commandments, or the Beatitudes. And, you know, I wonder something about that. For those of you that have a background that includes the Beatitudes, how many Beatitudes are there? Do you think it's 8, 12? See, I think it's a little different in Luke and in Matthew. But if it had a number, though, we'd remember it a lot better, wouldn't we? You know, we know what the 10 Commandments are, sort of. But what are the Beatitudes? We need a number. And we also have, as Unitarian Universalists, we have, depending on who you talk to, either 7 or 8 principles, right? Because denominationally, I guess we have 7 principles, and our church has adopted an 8th principle. So the 10 rules from the Atlantic were written by the esteemed Professor Arthur C. Brooks. It was after I decided to use this article that I learned it was merely a tiny part of the promotional kickoff for a book entitled Build the Life You Want by Arthur C. Brooks and Oprah Winfrey. Well, Arthur C. Brooks is an American social scientist, the William Henry Bloomberg Professor of the Practice of Public Leadership at Harvard, and Oprah is Oprah. So the great idea is to make a 3-sermon series out of this. That way, if the first one is terrible, it can only improve. Today we'll begin with the first 3 virtues that Socrates mentions, not Socrates, the other guy, Aristotle. That way, and those virtues are courage, temperance, and liberality. Then we'll make a few comparisons with our current UU principles. So what could go wrong? First, let me introduce the name source of Mr. Brooks' article, Aristotle. Aristotle was born in the 4th century BC He was a Greek philosopher who significantly contributed to many fields, including logic, physics, biology, metaphysics, ethics, politics, and rhetoric. He is considered one of the most influential thinkers in Western history, and his ideas continue to be studied and described today. Aristotle was born in northern Greece. His father was the personal physician to King Amyntas III of Macedon, and Aristotle received a privileged education. At 17, he went to Athens to study at Plato's academy, where he remained for 20 years. So some of these names, you've got Socrates, or also called Socrates in Bill and Ted's Adventure. And then you've got his student Plato, and then his student Aristotle. They are actually quite different in their way of looking at the world. Okay, so Aristotle was a critical thinker who was unafraid to challenge Plato's ideas. He developed his unique philosophical system based on the belief that the world is knowable through reason and experience. Aristotle believed that the goal of human life is to achieve eudaimonia. How's that for a word? Often translated as happiness or flourishing. He argued that eudaimonia is achieved through the exercise of virtue. Aristotle identified several essential moral virtues: courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom. So let's talk about courage. This is the first one listed by Mr. Brooks. When Aristotle wrote about courage, it was about a willingness to sacrifice one's life in war. That was it. That was courage. And so I guess if you were a woman, you couldn't really have too much courage back then. But how does it apply to most of us in today's society when we think about courage only being something you can display by giving your life for somebody in the military or for your country, if you want to be more abstract about that? And, but there's a few examples of principles that we have that would require courage if taken to an individual extreme. Very few of us serve in the military. I think even less serve in combat in the military. All the people that died in Iraq and Afghanistan in our most recent wars were just thousands of people compared to the kind of carnage that we see in broader wars. So very few of us serve in the military. And when we aren't in the military, we arrange our lives around our safety, don't we? That's always on our minds. The older we get, it seems, the more concerned about safety we are. Why is that? And so we buy cars with all those extra safety features, costs us a lot of extra money. We are careful where we go and how we get there. So what is life like now, being dead or killed for the sake of somebody else? Well, some people seem to think that being canceled is a little like dying. You know what I mean by canceled? That's the newest word for anybody that feels like they're not being treated well. Canceled. Well, I suppose any of our principles could require courage if taken to an individual extreme. Our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, is a principle that can, at times, require courage. I think this is especially difficult for children. How many of you have had to talk with children about being bullied at school or called names or being physically tripped or smacked or even worse? Now, how do you talk to children about this when we can't even learn to get along as adults sometimes? But that's where you start. If you want to start teaching principles of being a UU, you talk about how our first principle means that every classmate that you have is a valuable person, has inherent worth and dignity, no matter what their race or ethnicity or religion or their gender influences, all the same. Here are a few examples of being courageous in upholding the first principle of Unitarian Universalism, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Now, speaking out against injustice, even when it is unpopular or dangerous, for example, a Unitarian Universalism might speak out against racism, sexism, homophobia, or other forms of discrimination, even if they know they could face backlash from their peers or community. Advocating for the rights of marginalized groups, Unitarian Universalists might work to advocate for the rights of immigrants, refugees, people with disabilities, or other groups that are often overlooked or discriminated against. Standing up for people who are bullied and harassed, Unitarian Universalists must intervene when someone is being bullied or harassed, even if it means putting themselves in a difficult position. That's not so easy when you're in public and you have to defend somebody who's being bullied or harassed. Beyond this are commitments that we make in our lives. It's one thing to volunteer some of your hours to work at a shelter for children with disabilities. It's another thing to raise children with disabilities, and we can't all do the same thing. But one thing I want to mention about all of these 7 or 8 Unitarian Universalist principles is that they tend to have 2 meanings. One meaning for most of them is, this is something I have to do myself to be a better Unitarian Universalist. But at the same time, none of these things really work at all if only a few people are doing them. For example, the respect that we have for the interdependence of the web of everything in this universe. This is important to us. It's our whole environmental thing. And it's one thing for us to individually do everything how many of you recycle? Right. And how many of you try not to use disposable products? Yeah. And we can go on and on and on. Are we changing in any significant way the amount of these materials that are being used? Probably not. Probably not. That's why the other thing on each of these things is that we have to work collectively for things to work. And we can work voluntarily collectively to a certain extent within religious organizations and other clubs and that kind of stuff. And there's some increased effect about that. But really, you can't change anything unless you change the laws. You change the financial incentives, you change the laws. And we've had this going on in this country. Pretty much one side doesn't like any laws, and the other side thinks they're necessary. And we can't seem to get anywhere on that. But until we do, there's only so much we're going to be able to do. Now, what about the issue of children? I've mentioned disabled children. We have sick children. If you watch cable news as much as I do, you see all the St. Jude Hospital commercials. I feel terrible, but what can you do? Only so much you can do. But really, that's why we're politically involved, most of us, is because we realize that unless we can get things changed on a political broad nature, the progress we're going to make on that principle of the interconnected web is not going to go anywhere. All right. Now, regarding other people's children, we have a lot of children in this congregation that have some special needs. Some of them, it's almost just as simple as their race, which isn't so simple in this country. And, but also physical and emotional and intellectual disabilities. And I know that in our case, for Susan and I, that people express a lot of goodwill towards us. They let us know they recognize what we're doing, and we get some help, which we appreciate. Every time someone's offered to help, it's been a big help for us. And I think it's probably the same for other people with kids with disability. However, we don't expect you to do everything. And really all you got to do is just be nice to kids on Sunday morning. And you've done more than many people do. All right. The second virtue Mr. Brooks addresses in temperance is temperance. Self-control in the face of one's appetites and base impulses. Now, I take some personal umbrage at this virtue, as I believe it is one of my weakest. Remember the story about the kids given a marshmallow and told they would receive a second marshmallow if they could wait a short time without consuming the first one? The one who couldn't wait? I'm that kid. Okay? And I've watched how that's affected me my whole life. Not able to save time for the future. It's usually the result for me. The UU principle that is enhanced by temperance is again our seventh principle that I just mentioned. Respect for the independent web of all existence of which we are part. Conservation, low consumption. Well, again, we got to watch that we don't turn everything into individual efforts, as I was just discussing. We got to find a way for large groups of people or even whole countries to do things. The last virtue I'll discuss today concerning the UU principles is liberality. This liberal refers more to money than politics. It's literally just talking about being liberal with those things you possess. Aristotle recommends avoiding stinginess without being a spendthrift, a happy median, if you will. So how do you do those kinds of things in this world? Well, as individuals, there's lots of things we can do. One thing I don't do very well is when people are panhandling for money, I don't do that. But I feel bad about it. So I just don't think I can do any good by doing that. Could be wrong. The other thing you can do is when you eat out is tip generously. You know, the 20% is sort of the baseline. So if you feel like it, you can help that person directly by giving them a larger tip. You can leave the change at stores. Quite often they'll have a donation place for leave the change. You can use kind words liberally. I think this is a very important part of this. It takes nothing to say something kind to somebody. And how little happens. Now, the person I think of when I think of someone who's really good at saying kind things to people is my son, Dark Angel, who didn't come this morning. But he is amazing the way he's always thinking about something he can say kind to people. Whether they're a complete stranger, someone he knows a little, someone he knows a lot. He wants to compliment them about something they're wearing, or tell them they got something cool, or they look really nice today. And you know what? It doesn't really matter what it is, except he thinks about it and he says it. So that's something that we could all do to be more liberal in our giving. All right. You got to be aware, though, when you're planning group things, of the varied nature of incomes and wealth among the people you're with. Even if we go out with people from this church, which tends to be a little homogeneous in some ways, culturally, socially. Even then, if you go to like a restaurant and eat a group meal, you got to be mindful of people, you know. You can't just say, well, let's just all split it 10 ways or something like that, especially if there's alcohol served. Because someone might be looking for keep their check low because they need to. So the claim that is that practicing virtuous will lead to a happy life. So all three of these points here that we attached a UU value to and are part of the 10 ethics that I want to say Socrates, but it's not. Aristotle has recommended. Will this lead to a happy life? Is it true? Now, if you read his article, and I'm sure his book that he did with Oprah Winfrey, you're going to find a lot of mentions of scientific experiments that back up the things that they're saying by Aristotle or any of these other lists. It just doesn't work that easily. I would more recommend, and I mentioned this before, a Stoic way of looking at things, which is not a dissimilar philosophy to Aristotle's. However, a Stoic is just expecting less. Okay? The Stoics, they expect that they're going to have happiness in their life. They expect that they'll act virtuous. And they expect that, generally speaking, they'll have a good life, but it does not protect them from death or misfortune. And so a Stoic will go through hard times and realize, this too shall pass. And those good times, that eudaimonia that Aristotle mentioned, will return. We'll have those feelings of some euphoria, you could say, and things going well in life. So I'm going to finish up with a summary of our 7 Here we go, our 7 principles, and the first 3 rules from Aristotle. So first principle, on the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Third principle, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large. Sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And we discussed the first 3 rules that he had, but we're going to discuss next week the second 3 rules, which are magnificence, greatness of soul, and gentleness. And now you may rise and stand as you wish to sing, what number? 1018.
Our chalice extinguishing today is Remembering That We Do Not Walk Alone by the Reverend Scott Taylor. May we remember that we never walk out into the world alone. We stand on the shoulders of brave and generous ones who have gone before. We walk beside companions ready to catch us when we fall. We hold memories of dear ones in our hearts who keep us connected to our center. May we make this our most important work, to remember that who we are does not end at the edges of our own skin. And now, the announcements. More information about our events and the congregation are posted in the weekly newsletter and on our website, northwestuu.org. We're hosting a neighborhood block party at Northwest today, featuring the Braxton Vanzant Band from noon to 3. The Braxton Vanzant Band is one of the best show-stopping entertainers in the country. That's what it says here. Braxton and his four-piece band will dance, sing, and entertain with R&B, blues, jazz, and rock and roll on a superstar level. We'll have free hot dogs, popcorn, and lemonade. The music will be from 1 to 3. There will be free face painting, fall crafts, and it'll be near the playground for the kids. Second announcement is from Moses. Northwest is in the process of building out our social justice committee. This ministry is about relationships within our congregation, within the community, in order to make sure the values and vision of both are being protected. The beginning of this process is of course relational, so we, in partnership with Moses organizers, want to begin to conduct a series of one-on-one conversations with individuals interested in being a part of this core team. We would like to set up 30 to 45-minute conversations to hear your stories, your passions, and your vision. Dewan and Andrea will be available after the service to set up these conversations. Special announcement for the service auction. The service auction virtual auction begins today. You can go online to nwuu.maxgiving.bid/aboutus to donate items, services, and/or events. Don't have a computer? You can always do things old school by bringing items to church or reaching out to a service auction committee member. Remember, the service auction is Northwest's biggest and best fundraiser. You can see Beata Lamparski, Jan Berger-Cohn, Margaret Block, Tracy Gaidiris, Linda Morris, Martha Spear, or Sally Young for more information.